Hey everybody, Jesse Montano here, Guerilla Sports. Well, we are at the NHL's Four Nations break. Whew! Couple weeks here to catch our breath, and it had been a little bit too long since we had answered your guys' questions. So I got 10 questions here from you, and I'm going to try to go through them quick. So this isn't like a 20-minute video answering your guys' questions. Starting here, at Avs Canes fan. Any chance you think that Drury will get a look at 2C? It happened from time to time in Carolina when the scoring would stagnate. I'll put it this way. If you're trying Jack Drury at 2C here in Colorado, something has gone terribly wrong. We got some Casey Middlestat questions we'll get into in a second, but I think Jack Drury was brought here to be a depth piece for the Avs. Third line, maybe even fourth line guy when everything shakes out, maybe the way that Chris MacFarland would truly hope. So is there a chance that Chris Drury maybe takes some 2C reps or at least plays with some of those players that normally are on the second line in a game where maybe the scoring isn't where Jared Bednar wants it? Sure, I can see something like that. But if we are seeing any game where Jack Drury is being slotted in as the 2C to start, like I said, something has gone wrong. Next, from at Eric Hervu? Sorry, Eric. What archetype of defenseman would you like? Would you look to bring to the Avs prior to the deadline? Would this include moving Josh Manson to get it done? So I think this is an interesting question. I'm glad you included Josh Manson on it. If you are, the Avs need a top four defenseman. Straight and clear. The Avs need a top four defenseman. And truthfully, I think you need someone that archetypes like Josh Manson because right now he is what gives you something different on that D-core from really what a lot of the other pieces you've got back there are. So I think a Josh Manson type, a guy who's got some offensive upside but can also lock things down, be a little bit more of a physical presence, is what I think that they would be served well in looking for. Now, I've talked about, do you potentially move on from Josh Manson as we get closer to the deadline to free up that money? Maybe. That might be something that makes sense if you've got a buyer. Josh Manson has struggled recently since coming back from injury. We'll see how he looks coming out of this break, but I do not think moving on from Josh Manson is off the table. I'll put it that way. This one from Spilot23. Is there a chance Rantanen signs in Colorado in the offseason? We've heard that he would take less than Mac to stay, but I think if that was the case, he would have re-signed. I'm not some cap-friendly wizard, and I don't know if Avs could manage cap-wise. Look, you're getting about $10 million in cap space this summer. Could the Avs make it work from a dollars and cents perspective? Yeah, I would say that they could make something work with Mikko Rantanen. Now, look, you hear all kinds of things this time of year, and we're talking about pending free agents. I have heard that there is an outside chance, not even an outside chance. I've heard there's a chance that these two could circle back and find a deal this summer. Do I think it's likely? No, I don't think it's likely. Is it possible? Yeah, for sure it's possible. The percentage is definitely not zero. I think a lot of things would have to be exactly right, and the dollar figures would have to make sense for everybody. And we also have to see how Mikko Rantanen finishes out the year with the Carolina Hurricanes, including what he does here at the Four Nations tournament. Is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? No. From at Rick Brunetti. Are teams allowed to practice during the 2-week break? No, they are not. The Avs will not be practicing again until at least the 19th. This is a full league-wide pause. I don't quite know if it's on the same parameters as what we see around like Christmas, where players aren't even allowed in team facilities. But no, teams are not allowed to practice. From Jay Schultz, 29. I have heard multiple national reporters that Colorado may not be a cap team moving forward with the large cap increases. I think there have definitely been some folks you've heard talk about Colorado falling into this internal cap situation. I think the Avs will spend to the cap at least for the next few years, but this is going to pose with the 3, 4, and 5-year projections that we're seeing out there. I do think that this is going to pose a little bit of a changing landscape for the NHL, and you might be getting back to stuff similar to what we saw in the 90s and early 2000s, where the teams who had owners that had the money and were willing to spend are going to be the teams at the top of the league. And then you might have some clubs Ottawa has been one that I've heard a lot of folks throw around that are just going to say, yeah, we don't have that kind of money to throw around. This is one thing to understand about the Avalanche and really even the Denver Nuggets. Kroenke Sports and Entertainment, KSE, is one of the most valuable and wealthy sports management and sports ownership companies in the world. Last data that I saw, which I'll say was about 2 years ago, they were actually number 2 behind only MSG Sports. So this will not be an issue of, does Kroenke have the money to spend the way that, say, the Toronto Maple Leafs will, but really, are they going to operate off of being more conservative? Are they going to place an internal cap on, you can't make more than Nathan MacKinnon, but we'll spend all the money? We're not really sure. This is like I said, this is a changing landscape. We'll see how it shapes the league here over the next few years. This one from @Jared360p. A talking point for years with Mikko had been that because of his skill upside, you just deal with the sometimes disengaged or seemingly lethargic play. I wonder if that was so outside of Bednar's system that it finally became a problem and influenced the trade. From everything that I know, folks that I've talked to, no. I don't think this had anything to do with why they moved on from Mikko Rantanen. But I do think that there was a system here built that allowed Mikko Rantanen to continue to shine and even thrive offensively, even on those nights where he wasn't necessarily on the top of his game, fully committed 200 feet. I was a big proponent of, you live with those types of mistakes or lapses because of what all he gives you offensively. But as we've seen very quickly, after just 6 games in Carolina, if you don't produce offensively, it is much tougher to deflect that criticism that Mikko Rantanen can sometimes attract. I still think Mikko Rantanen's an elite player. I think he's an elite goal scorer, and he's one of the best in the league at something that is very hard to do, and that's score goals. So for me, I still fall into the camp of you live with it, you put up with it, but I do think that you could maybe make the argument of when you're talking about a $14 million or more player, is that something that's got to be part of the conversation? And maybe that is where some of the breakdown was when the number and the ask from Mikko Rantanen's side started to go up. From @BabeLandeskog. Have you seen the room change with Necas's arrival? Nate certainly seems to be a bit lighter. Who seems to be an early friend to Necas in the room? Well, I'll tell you this right now. Marty Necas got on the Nathan MacKinnon inside circle immediately. Him and Nate they're talking constantly. His stall is right next to Nate and Drouin in the locker room. So he definitely seems to have gotten into that inside circle with Nathan MacKinnon and company quickly. I don't necessarily know if I've seen it change the way that it changed when the new goalies got to town. But you can definitely tell that trade, obviously, was a shock to the system. And a little bit maybe of a wake-up call to guys in the room that, hey, there's a very short list, 2 names long, of guys that are untouchable. Anybody else in here, we will move on from if we think it's better for the organization right now or in the future. And so I do think that there has been a refocus in the locker room and maybe a dial or 2 up in intensity, but I don't necessarily know if I've seen it change, like I said, the same way we saw it change when Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood got to town, where it was clearly a much lighter, much happier, much more engaged room. This one from @NC Avalanche. What are your thoughts on Noah Dobson? Heard he's available from NYI, the New York Islanders. Think he'd look good in the Avs system. I think that is a player that would make some sense for the Avs, needing to add someone that's a top 4 guy, little bit, someone who can fit in with the age range of your core. It's all about cost when it comes to a guy like Noah Dobson, and really anything that the Islanders have going right now. It's all going to come down to what do you pay to bring that player in, and how do you see their fit long term. But I do think if the Avs were able to add Noah Dobson here before the deadline, that would be, for me, I'd be looking at that as an upgrade there in the middle part of that defense. From @Durst of Times, bigger trade need, center or defense. It's defense going away. They need to improve the back end of this team. You've heard me talk about it ad nauseum over the last few years. This team is driven by their defense. The offense runs through the defense. This team their championship competitive window hangs, in my opinion, on how strong of a decor can they build. When you got Nathan MacKinnon up front, and really, we normally include Mikko Rantanen in that, obviously, with the way that Marty Netschus has played since arriving on the scene, with what Nathan MacKinnon is doing, with the step forward that it has felt like Artturi Lehkonen has taken this year, if and when you get Val Nichushkin back, you've got a much better forward core than I think people are giving it credit for on the internet right now. This is a team that's dangerous up front, can score goals when they're going, I said. And the addition of Jack Drury plus some other things that we know they'll do ahead of the deadline, the depth is going to be there up front. And look, we've seen the flashes from Casey Middlestat. We know he can be a good player. We know he can play in that 2C role. It's just a matter of him playing to that expectation. You can continue to hope on that a little bit, more so than you can trying to get away with what you've got going on the back end right now. They absolutely need to address the defense before we're going to end with this one from @Landy's Knee, and it just ties in perfectly to what we were just talking about. Is it time yet to consider moving on from Casey Middlestat? Look, we have seen the reports out there that Casey Middlestat was offered as part of a JT Miller trade with the Vancouver Canucks. Clearly, this has gone on long enough that the Avs are saying, hey, if we can use him as a money out in a deal that would be a money in, money out, well, we're willing to do that. He has not lived up to the expectations that we had for him. But I do also think Casey Middlestat's a young player who has shown he can play in this system and he can play playoff hockey. He's had some of his better games ever playing for this organization in just the last year-ish. We're coming up on just about a year. So I'm still in the camp that if you decided you wanted to continue to ride this out with Casey Middlestat to see if you could turn that corner, I'm on board with that. I think that's fine. But if you feel that you've got a solution out there that's an upgrade on Casey Middlestat and you can move him to help make the money work, then do it. He has not been good enough this season, and as much as it sucks at times, pro sports, the NHL, is a what have you done for me lately business. And Casey Middlestat, while it's been better in, say, the last month, it has not been to expectations, and this is a team that is trying to win a Stanley Cup right now, this year. The moves that Chris MacFarland has made to bring in Mackenzie Blackwood, to make a franchise-altering trade by sending Mikko Rantanen out and bringing Marty Netschus back in, who has fit in seamlessly. These are moves being made by a general manager who is trying to bring a championship back to his city, just like they did a couple of years ago. So if you can upgrade on him and use Casey Middlestat as the money out for a money in, money out deal, I say do it. If you don't have a trade partner that you feel makes sense and brings in a player that is a clear upgrade on Casey Middlestat, then I say ride it out and see what you get out of him. This is a player who works really closely with Nathan MacKinnon, and I do think has the ability to round the corner and become the player the Avs need him to be, but he's got to start doing it right now. Right now. As soon as that Four Nations break ends, he needs to get that level back to what we saw it last year in the playoffs. All right, that's going to do it. Megan will be answering your guys' questions here next week. But, hey, enjoy the Four Nations break, and we'll be back at it talking Avs, talking Four Nations, all of it on the podcast very soon. Thanks so much, guys.